The Circuit of Americas just keeps on delivering. What a race in 2024 with plenty of headlines and things to go over. We learned a lot from this GP. Obviously, the biggest talking point is going to be Lando and Max and whether that was a deserving penalty. But we have to praise Leclerc and what an outstanding effort he played to get this incredible victory for Ferrari, a 1-2. It's been a while for them, but that's the second one of the season, and this Ferrari car has came alive since Monza. That floor upgrade has done wonders for them, and on a track like this, it really proves their pace is there. Liam Lawson ended up scoring his first points as well. We had Colapinto score a point as well, and strategies were all over the place. So let's go over this race, talking about what happened in the 2024 COTA GP. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. It'd mean the world to me. You guys are the best and always motivate me. Let's get started into lap 1 on what happened here in the 2024 GP. Right at the start, Lando ended up getting pole position yesterday, and we knew it was going to be feisty amongst Lando and Max, and with his track record, nobody was really expecting Lando to hold the lead in lap 1. It's also a very hard track to actually keep the lead. It's statistically a track that typically the person on pole doesn't win. Now going into turn 1, this could also be debated on whether there should have been a penalty or not. And I definitely think that the stewards, when it comes to COTA, are very inconsistent because of the track layout and how wide turn 1 is. It really plays a part into who's actually at fault, who's not. Max does go for a very ambitious lunge. He has the kahunas to go for it every single time, and that's where you gotta praise Max. He doesn't care, he's just gonna go for it, and I think that's something Lando needs to learn. He needed to close that off, but yet again, you close it off, easy run for Leclerc and Carlos on the outside. It's such a big turn 1, and there's so many variables playing at stake when going into this corner. So I don't necessarily blame Lando, but I do think the officiating should be better. I would have judged this as possibly a penalty. It's very hard to tell if Max actually kept all 4 wheels on track. He was like right on the edge there. I just think the officiating in turn 1 needs to be done a bit better, especially on the start. We saw it in 2016 with Nico and Lewis, and we're going to continue seeing it because the person on the outside never has the advantage here in COTA on turn 1. But taking away from Lando and Max, Leclerc does a beautiful setup there, and so does Carlos, who ends up getting right behind Max to end up putting a P1 Charles, P2 Max, P3 Carlos, and then P4 Lando, and then the list goes on. But Charles and P1 right off the start, making a huge gap in the beginning of the race. It was clear to see that the Ferrari car reigned supreme here, and it was one of the only cars, and while it's been mentioned so much, that had no upgrades here. So this car came in naked and afraid and destroyed the competition. So I gotta give them props. This Ferrari car looks mean, and this is very good for the 2025 because the only thing that they've added as of recently was that front wing. Supposedly, as of right now, as we're speaking, that front wing is supposed to be bolted onto 25 cars, so they're testing it and seeing how it's going to be in 25. But then Lewis's weekend and just overall this Mercedes weekend has been awful. And he goes off in turn 19 into the gravel, ends up locking up the wheels, and it's game over for Lewis. Quickly in COTA, it's been one of his best tracks of his career. Sad to see it happen, but you know what? Lewis doesn't crash very often. Mistakes happen. It's not really been his best year ever anyways, so I think it's okay if this happens to Lewis. He'll recover quickly. It wasn't meant to be anyways. He was starting from the back, so mistakes happen. But then we get our first safety car after 9 races, and while it was a pretty boring one because it didn't really play too much of a factor into the race, I guess it gave drivers the choice now whether they wanted to go for a 1-stop or a 2-stop because COTA is notorious for always having 2 stops. And this track this year did not have 2 stops. For the most part, it was 1 stops, and that was the better strategy, especially for the front-running teams. And as this goes on, the positions pretty much stay at place with Leclerc in P1, Max in P2, P3 Carlos, but you can tell that the tire degradation is getting to the Red Bull and the McLaren is gaining pace. Lando is catching Max and Carlos, but Carlos ends up going into pit stop early. Leclerc, Max, and Lando end up staying out. Still some more open road for Leclerc, and he's just making his gap more and more prominent. Seems like a very easy victory ahead for the Ferrari driver. But then we get to lap 26 where finally Verstappen pits, but he comes out behind Sainz. So a beautiful strategy play there by Ferrari. Sainz ends up actually staying out for the rest of the race, so he pitted earlier than Max. stayed out and still had tire life by the end of the GP. So this Ferrari car is very menacing, and I promise I will talk way more about it very soon. He came out pretty comfortably behind Sainz, and that was kind of where he was going to stick, but the competition was obviously the driver behind, Lando, who stayed out, still trying to conserve as much tire life as possible to have a delta on Max to possibly catch him by the end of the GP. Leclerc then ends up pitting on the next lap. He comes out, ends up being in P3, Piastri and Lando are ahead, the McLarens are ahead, but we know the pace on this driver, and he ends up catching those drivers, getting himself into that P1 position after Lando and Piastri pit on lap 32 and lap 33. But then this is where the GP gets very exciting. On lap 36, this is where the gap is around 4.5 seconds between Lando and Max, and we can hear Max complaining plenty on the radio that the Red Bull is not braking correctly. He's not able to hit those apexes like he was on the medium tires. And in the RB20's, tire life problems have came back. Not as bad as it's been, but yet again, it's a problem, and it's clear to see that Red Bull isn't as fast as the McLaren. In the meantime, Liam, Colapinto, and George went on a crazy hard strategy, recently pitting within that lap range, and Liam ends up getting ahead of Gasly for P10 on a crazy strategy. What a way to come back. First off, you make the old man Fernando mad, and then you come in and you score some points. I mean, it's a very fashionable way to come in, and I gotta give him props. He had an outstanding GP. Good job for Liam. He might be in the Red Bull in 2025 if it continues like this. But that's also, like I said, where Colapinto ends up pitting. This guy had an outstanding race. What a driver. Albon had a very unfortunate race. The drivers that pit for 2 stops were definitely at a disadvantage. The 1 stop was much better here in COTA today. But then we're going to fast forward a little bit to lap 44, where everything is getting nitty gritty and Norris is breathing down the neck of Verstappen. And now it looks like there is a move available on every lap pretty much if Lando can nail that exit, but Max ends up defending like a lion. And it's a matter of who's got bigger balls going into that corner. And at the end of the day, we all know what's going to happen. Max is not going to give up that position, and Lando does not have enough force to actually make the overtake in spots like this. Regardless of how good Lando is, Max is just a step up above a lot of the other drivers, especially Lando, and it continues to be shown from GP to GP. In this slower car, Max continues to defend, always defending the inside going into this corner because that is the optimal line if you want to make the overtake, and placing his car perfectly. There are no flaws here, and we know what happens if you try going on the outside. Usually you get pushed off the track, and it is the driver that's ahead of the apex that has the advantage. That is the rule set by F1. Max loves to take those rules and push them to the limit. It's always been his thing. Constantly side by side, by lap 47 we end up seeing them almost go into that very last corner side by side. Lando never tries a move into turn 1. Maybe he would have had a better chance there, but we never ended up seeing the effort from Lando, so it never ended up coming true. But then the incident happens. Lap 52, Lando gets ahead. He was about 3/10 behind Max before the DRS, so he gets a huge advantage. He ends up getting super close to ahead on the apex, but isn't by the time they go into the full out braking zone. Max is slightly ahead. This is more of a racing incident to me. I like when drivers go this hard. Max loves to play this game. Lando needs to learn to play this game just like Lewis did in 2021. The reason why Lewis was winning in 2021 at some point halfway through the season was that he ended up playing the same game that Verstappen plays. Lando has not done that yet. And unfortunately, it's going to continue being a problem because he can't be like how Max is. And that's what's required to be a champion. And I do think, to say it all, I think the penalty was fair. I think McLaren should have looked at this, said, give him back to position. They had the faster car. It was more on Lando trying to get on that inside line or getting to make Max make a mistake, but that didn't happen. Max made no mistakes, flawless drive. I think the 5-second penalty was fair. And there's more to talk about on that penalty as well. It's very close. I can see where both people have an opinion. Some people are going to think that Lando was ahead on the apex. Some people are going to think Max. It's very close. But that should not take anything away from the flawless performance that Ferrari had. Leclerc is your winner. Sainz is in P2. That puts P3 Max on that podium. What a drive by Max. I would probably say he's the driver of the day. But then yet again, Leclerc. And if it wasn't for Carlos having a problem in the beginning of the race, it's debatable. Maybe Carlos could have caught Leclerc he had an outstanding weekend and was the most fun driver to watch, I must say. What a drive by the Ferrari boys, but at this point, it does seem like it's close to over. If I'm being honest, it's too big, and if the cars are this close to an advantage, unless Norris gets a lot of luck, it's not really going to happen. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know, who did you think was ahead? Let's have a civil discussion. Let's not fight about it. What happened. Norris was going to get the penalty anyways from the looks of it, so let's talk about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please leave a like, subscribe, it'd mean the world, and peace.